here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Shayne Carter, or Shayne P. Carter, all the way from New Zealand, who was in various bands, including Straitjacket Fits, and also later on in the 90s, and for another decade in another outfit titled Dimmer. So this is the interview. Also, there was a film made about him, which came out last year, 2025. Do check it out. And also he wrote a book. I will put links in the notes below. So after several minutes of interest and casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Shayne, it's over to you.
Well, both my parents were musicians, so my parents were really young, and my dad, he played in rock bands. He was into Jimi Hendrix. We had a cover of Are You Experienced covering The Hole in Our Kitchen Wall. And my mum, she was sort of more into, what was she into? She was into stuff like Lulu and Sandy Shaw and all that kind of stuff. We're talking the 60s.
Yes.
So music was all around me. I think the first thing I liked when I was about 5 was about, the Beatles, like lots of kids. And, but yeah, probably, I'm a similar vintage to you. And yeah, the glitter stuff, it's awesome. I love the production on those records. And despite the later revelations about Gary Glitter and all that kind of stuff, just the sound of the Glitter Band was an awesome sound.
Yes.
And that guitar sound that all those Glitter Bands got, it was always really influential to me. It's got the same drone factor as Third Stone from the Sun by Hendrix, So that's the kind of guitar that I liked. And yeah, so I was a glitter kid. I also liked Donny Osmond when I was about 9. And it was a Donny Osmond tribute song. It was a very sappy song about the girl on the street next door. That was the first song I ever wrote.
Right, blimey! There you go. You took Donny that sort of and was Crazy Horses one of those songs that you also embraced with great enthusiasm?
Crazy Horses, yeah, that rock, man, yeah. T-Rex, all that kind of stuff. T-Rex still sound great. And, so I guess that glitter stuff, just because it was really punchy and powerful, I think that's why I liked it. And and then of course, a couple of years later, when I was still, just starting high school, I saw the Sex Pistols on TV, and that was my in, really.
Yes. And did you, at that stage, have any older brothers or sisters that can sometimes have a great influence on your kind of musical direction or sort of impact in some way?
No, I was the oldest in my family, and the oldest kid, and so my parents, even though they always really supported me in my musical endeavours, and they loved music themselves, they just sort of thought the punk rock thing was kind of cute. But I don't know, I was kind of a solitary kid, so initially it was kind of a solitary journey, and then I eventually found some other kids in the town I was from, which is Dunedin, who were on the same trip, and I was astounded to find these kids, and they played me stuff like the Stooges and
Right.
the stuff that I'd never heard before, and so I sort of found my tribe, really.
Yes. And when did you get a musical instrument? When did that sort of appear in your life?
So I was actually a singer because I couldn't play any instruments. But I wrote in my book that I had an innate need for revenge. So being a singer was great, and so I really felt like I had something to say, and it was awesome having to say it into a microphone.
Yes.
So so I was initially the singer in my first band, and my first songwriting forays were just writing punk rock lyrics, and eventually I found some high school buddies, and we started setting these songs to music because they could actually, well, they couldn't play, but they had instruments that they couldn't play, so it was a start. And then, and by this stage, a one-string guitar had materialised in our house. So in my first band, Board Games, I wrote all the songs on one string, and but you just turn those into a bar chord, so you were away, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Did you leave school? Because in this country, 16 was often an age, especially in the 70s, people just would leave with minimum qualifications. Very few people went and took sort of A levels and then possibly went to further education or, heaven forbid, a university. There would have been a polytechnic back then anyway. Did you go?
No, I went right through high school. I actually went through high school because I edited the school newspaper in my last year there, and I wanted to be a journalist. And when I left school at the age of 17, I actually was a journalist for a couple of years. Um, but yeah, I can't remember what the question was, but that's what happened.
Yes, just how long you stayed at school. So then you got, obviously, you must have been a little bit older than me because I say must be, but punk, I was a bit too young for punk, really. That slightly passed me by until
You
a
were
few
born in
years.
1964, man. I was born in 1964. Come on, get with the program, my friend. Like
Yes.
13, right for the plucking. Yeah. So yeah,
Yes,
so yeah, so yeah, no, I was ready for it, and look,
right.
they played Pretty Vacant. The clips were Pretty Vacant on New Zealand TV, and I think there was one music show, one late night music show that would play anything vaguely left of centre, and yeah, when I saw that, yeah, it really really knocked me out, and yeah,
That was
thus
it. That was your moment. To be honest, I think in I grew up in the countryside in East Anglia, and it was mostly heavy metal, and people loved bands like Status Quo and Black Sabbath, Deep Purple. So it was a very and punk. You know, it was interesting. You know that sense of punk just seemed too rebellious for heavy metal kids, who even though they were pretending to be rebellious, well, they were being, but they were still quite conservative in a lot of ways. When they kind of heard that dirty sound of things like the Sex Pistols or the Clash, it would have just been a little bit too much anarchy. Somehow they wanted to have rebelliousness, but in a slightly safe way.
nice rebellion.
It was a
It's
nice
quite
rebellion.
funny, like. Sorry to interrupt, but in the few hard rock gigs I've been to, I always loved Motorhead. I went to a Motorhead gig, and the crowd looked really foreboding, but it was such a nice crowd, and it was just such a good vibe there, and it was just so completely non-aggro. And then I had a similar experience. I went to see Slayer play, and exactly the same deal. You know, like you think, oh, it's all going to be devil worshipping and you know child sacrifice and all that lovely crowd, and I think it was just kind of the solidarity in the community. You know, people like yeah, fuck yeah, you know, like Slayer goats, you know, goat sign, and yeah. So it was just, and it was the same with Motorhead. It was like fuck yeah, Motorhead, come on, and yeah. So yeah, heavy rock crowds. So maybe they were too nice for punk rock.
Yes, there was something. It was this little, challenging the status quo, the government. I mean, yeah, it's kind of weird, but I do remember how sort of just didn't like that sort of slightly. It was like too chaotic and a too sort of. They really did feel like being threatened in a way. Yeah, I don't know. It was just a strange thing, really, to sort of witness in that way that one did. With your first band, Board Games, then, did you ever go in the studio and record any of your material at this stage?
No, we recorded a posthumous EP a year after we split up at the grand old age of 17 or something, and that was when Flying Nun wasn't going when we were playing. We couldn't play in pubs, and we barely played out of town, and had to organise our own gigs. So yeah, so then Flying Nun came along and started releasing records, and so they knew about Board Games. So we ended up, like I say, making a record after we split up.
Right. Who
The thing
killed
about
Colonel Mustard?
That's right, but I think the whole thing about punk rock for us kids who are literally sitting at the bottom of the world. And I think with a lot of rock and roll too, because we were so far away from it, it just made it more, it kind of romanticized it and made it more exotic and more so than if you saw the creators of that music just staggering around in your local club, you know. And yeah, I don't know, because it was more romantic and more exotic, it made it more powerful. And also, I found with punk rock as well, is that as with a lot of rock and roll, it gives marginalized people a voice. And I was a marginalised kid. You know, I came from a working class background and mixed race, and my dad was Maori in a very white town. And yeah, man. So, like I say, when I talk earlier about being ripe for the plucking, I totally was. You know, and this is a thing that you didn't have to be able to play. You didn't have to have technical expertise. You didn't have to have money. You know, you just had to have something to say.
Yes.
And so that was really it was
Did
really liberating for me, and I often, often thank whatever the outer entities that I found that outlet because a lot of kids who came from a similar background to me didn't find that outlet, you know. and put their energies in less positive places.
Yes. And was it quite a volatile band, your first band, Board Games? Did you have musical differences at times, or was it quite harmonious?
We were so young, man, that yeah, we weren't ready for musical differences. Like, we had to learn to be able to play before we thought, what we wanted to do differently. So,
Right. Because it says here that you used to have arguments on stage all the time.
nah, that's not true. Yeah. Oh, when you're 14 or 15, you fall out with your best friends all the time. Yeah. But no, that's not true. No, we were, Wayne, the bass player, who I later formed the Double Happies with, he left, and I think we may have fallen out at that point. But we ended up forming a band together. So no, we didn't argue on stage. No, we were sticking it to the audience, not to each other.
Right, yes. And when you sort of entered journalist school then, journalism, did you start getting lots of freebies and going to gigs and getting free albums and records at this point?
No, not at all. I would have stayed longer if I knew that was going to happen.
Right. You didn't, yes, well, that was often
No,
the thing
I
that
was so
happened.
young. I was the cover reporter. I worked at a private radio station for 2.5 years, and honestly, it really put me off working. And I haven't actually worked for anyone else ever since. I thought, nah. Yeah, I actually felt quite compromised doing it, and yeah, I've sort of avoided a regular job ever since.
Yes. And then sort of as the 80s progressed in this country, it was quite a sort of a bit of a tricky time politically because suddenly Thatcher gets in 79 and then we have the Falkland War and the miners' strike and then there's Greenham Commons, there's that sort of threat of nuclear war in the background. And there was this sort of post-punk kind of period that started. And then we had the New Romantics and that electronic sound that started to form as well, so there was quite a lot of musical moments happening. What was it like for you in New Zealand once the sort of the punk period had definitely finished, and then suddenly there was the new decade and a different sort of bands coming through at this point?
Well, when you talk about the nuclear thing, I think that was one thing that was actually really pertinent to our generation was just the spectre of the apocalypse. And, I had childhood friends who had to go see therapists, my friends were 11 or 12 because they're so freaked out about the world ending. So I know that the state of things, at the moment is really perilous and shit. But then again, we had our own, as kids, we had our own anxiety as well, and that was really real. Like we were kids. When you're kids, you're kind of mixed up anyway. And when you actually start tripping out on the thought, oh, look, the whole world's going to blow up, the apocalypse anxiety, that was really real.
Yes.
Um, Apart from worrying about the apocalypse, yeah, the 80s in New Zealand was really fraught. The Springbok tour, where the Springbok rugby team came and played here, they, only brought white players, and it was, representing an apartheid state. And it was basically like a civil war here, and it really, there's rioting in the streets, and the cops were beating up all the protesters, and the two sides of the New Zealand character, the really conservative side and the more liberal side. Really, it was probably the first time in our quite young countries, or our post-colonisation version of our country, where the two sides of our national character faced off with each other. So yeah, it was really full on, man, and the lines were drawn, And so for us in the musical environment we were in, we knew what side of the line we were on. And if anything, I think, if you want to put it into a musical context, or any good art, it has to have something to react against. And we sure had it. It was so conservative, and there's a really ugly side to the New Zealand character that we reacted against.
Yes. And what was the government at the time? Was that a conservative government as well?
Yeah, they were assholes. There was a guy called Robert Muldoon who was sort of a bully and mean and arrogant, and yeah, I have no good thoughts about him. And he was also the prime minister uh, when the Springbok tour happened. He was a classic divide and rule politician, which is still a great political ploy, still, isn't it? And
Yes.
after that, we actually had David Longy, and he was the Labour leader, but he was such a contrast to Muldoon, and that he wasn't a bully, and he was a great speaker. He did a famous speech, anti-nuclear speech, at the Oxford University debate, actually, and it was one of the first times that a New Zealand politician had expressed independence on an international stage. And I think that's when we started getting out of the shadow of colonialism, and where New Zealand, it was a real turning point for New Zealand exerting itself as an independent place, because we're not England. We're sitting in the middle of the Pacific, man, with a completely different make. We're 13,000 miles away, and yeah, so I think, and that sense of independence and self-determination, I think, is really reflected in the music that came out of our country in that time too, without being a parochial dick about it.
Yes. Well, and did you start sort of, was there a kind of a indie scene that started to happen in the neighborhood at that point in the sort of early to mid 80s?
Yeah, so like at the tail end of board games, we started playing with bands like the Clean and the Chills, the really early version of the Chills. We're playing community halls around, and it was kind of amazing out of our social group. A lot of the early Flying Nun bands, we're just all high school kids who, weirdly, in this town of 100,000 people, form bands. And so, yeah, the Verlaines, bands like the Stones, yeah, all the early Flying Nun stuff. So, yeah, and I thought I was just down in Dunedin recently, actually, and I saw some of the young bands coming up now, and authenticity is an overworked word, but there's still that strain to the music from down there. It's been many, pontifications about why the sort of scene happened in this tiny town in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, I think one of the reasons, and I know it happened with our bands, was that you're so far away from the media epicenters that it just doesn't matter. You're irrelevant and to mainstream media anyway. So, and the record industry. So
Yes.
really, we'd go out every weekend and see our friends' bands play, or go to their practice and think, oh, we want to write a song as good as that. So it's kind of like this internal inspiration going on, where you're actually playing to and for your peers, and you inspired each other. And the whole time we sort of felt like we were on the outside, because, the mainstream kids would come along to our dances and beat everybody up.
God.
So they really thought our music sucked, but we thought they sucked too. So, like I say, the lines were drawn. But yeah, I think there was no golden egg to chase, and I think that can be good just for developing something that's self-determined. And yeah, I don't know. And I think also any great music's got a soulful quality to it, and you can tell the people mean it. And I know the music from that scene. People
Yes,
mean
well,
it.
it's kind of interesting because I mean the 80s politically weren't great, but the soundtrack was incredible, and I think there was
Yeah.
that sense of for a lot of. I mean, I often wondered why there were so many indie bands that happened in the 80s in the UK, but I think part of it was there was such a lot of unemployment and an attitude that there was just nothing to work for and there was nothing to really sort of have ambition for. And we did have a good sort of unemployment benefit. There was a lot of there was things like the job seekers allowance and enterprise allowance schemes, which were ways to sort of say you're unemployed, but if you go on this scheme, you'll still be unemployed, but you won't be part of the statistics and the data that will get broadcast of how
But you'll
many
be a
people.
winner, not a loser.
So we can push you to one side. And it was like, oh yeah, I'll still get my dole money and
And you
I'll
can
get
win
my
over there.
so basically, it was like, what else are you going to do for another couple of years while you're signing on, And I think a lot of
Exactly,
people
man.
just formed
Same here.
bands, it was
Same
like,
here. Yeah. Well, the thing is too, on the dole here, you could actually live on it, especially in a place like Dunedin, because it's cheap, or it was cheap, and it was perfect. There's lots of empty warehouse spaces for practice rooms and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, look, I gave up my journalism career to go on the dole. And basically, these days they've got government bodies like Creative New Zealand that are funding bodies, and the Department of Social Welfare was the early incarnation of the Creative New Zealand that sponsored many an artistic career. So yeah, I think me and my friends we were all on the dole, and yeah, exactly, that's what happened.
it does
So
help. So
sit around in rooms and write our songs.
the next band, the Double Happies. So you sort of you got together with Wayne again at this point, didn't you? In sort of 83,
Hmm.
and then sort of who else was in the lineup at this stage?
We didn't have anybody else in the. We had a drum machine that we christened Herbie Fuckface because he only had two beats, which was slow rock and fast rock. So hence his,
Right.
yeah,
Good old
and
Herbie.
samba, which we used once, and yeah,
Did the
and
samba did you enjoy the samba setting?
the song we put around it was actually pretty cool, yeah. But Herbie's beats were pretty relentless, man. There wasn't a lot of sort of variation going on in his beats, but it was kind of good because we sort of played quite kind of primitive rock music in a lot of ways. So yeah, it really suited it. And but he wasn't so good live because we tried to kick him to turn him off, and like they would just break into a waltz or something. We'd hit the wrong button. So
Excellent.
yeah, eventually we had to get a drummer, which was Wayne's next door neighbour called John Colley, who went to the same high school as us, and John later drummed on the Straitjacket Fits too.
And you got a single on Flying Nun Records at this stage, the double A side, the double B side.
Yeah, so we recorded that really early on, and yeah, we our friends Doug Hood and Chris Knox in Auckland, who are sort of the Flying Nun people up there. They knew of Wayne from his previous band, The Stones, and they'd heard a demo that me and Wayne had done with our drum machine, which they really loved. And so, really early on, when we barely even started playing, we got put on a package tour going around the country with the Chills, they were the Expendables and Children's Hour from Auckland. A sort of a flying nun package tour. Uh, Maybe this was the mid '80s or something, and but yeah, it was really starting to blow up then, and we'd get played the universities and got huge crowds. So yeah, that's when we recorded our first single at the end of that tour.
Yes. My God. So that was 84 that was all sort of happening. And did you sort of find that you were sort of part of a kind of community? Did you sort of and the Chills, did everyone get on relatively well? Was that a good package?
Yeah, oh, that was great fun, that tour. Yeah, it was awesome. It was kind of weird though, because I look at photos of it and I realised there was only one woman on the entire tour. And even though we were reasonably right on, yeah, it was a big comment on the patriarchal society actually. And that was poor Jay, who was the singer and the songwriter and guitarist in the Expendables. I thought, oh man, poor Jay, and yeah, with all these fucking goobers, and yeah, so. Yeah, it reminds me of another time where many years later, and we were on tour with Dimmer in the States, and we were doing we were going around with the Brian Jonestown Massacre, and we were playing shows with them. We are doing a tour with them, and our bass player Kelly, poor Kelly, we went to this. I can remember going to this party in Salt Lake City, and it was literally at this party was all dudes and poor Kelly. So yeah, it was kind of like a throwback to that kind of situation, really. But both
Yes.
Kelly and Jay, to their credit, navigated the situations as best they could.
Blimey, I know, I know. It's sort of interesting when you sort of become aware of things. I remember there was something called a TV comedy thing called The Young Ones, which I thought was hilarious. And then I sort of watched it, years ago, thinking, oh, I wonder if I'll still find it amusing. And then I was just aware, it's like, why did they write it with four blokes in the house? Why didn't they have a couple of women? And there was like and it was co-written by a woman, it's herself. And I thought, God, that was such a feminist time. I remember the 80s feminists being so strident and, like committed to the cause. And yet, there was it just was a bit embarrassing. I thought, oh, I don't know if I can watch this now, actually. It spoiled the magic.
Yeah, no, well, that's things don't. Some stuff ages better than other stuff, doesn't it? And especially with sort of those kind of attitudes as well, And like I even know from my own personal experience, like when you grow up, you grow up in this environment of sexism and homophobia. Well, I did, as a child, and there's sort of a lot of casual attitudes that need to be undone, And like the slurs when you insulted another child would be either a homosexual slur, or when you insulted a woman, it'd be referring to her being a loose woman or something. And just sort of trying to unlearn all that kind of stuff. And
Yes.
uh, yeah, but cool thing I noticed recently, I went and did a songwriting course for all these young songwriters, and uh, part of the thing was that they were recording the songs as they went, and there's about four or five engineers or producer people on this particular gig, and they're all women, And when I was growing up, there were no women engineers, there were no women sound people, and like, which begs the question, why? And yeah, so it was really refreshing to see, that there's been progress like that anyway. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. So then, I mean, with the band, um, so there was a horrendous accident, and is Wayne gets killed, doesn't he?
Yeah, he died in a train accident while we were on tour.
Yes, I mean that's was that the kind of the first death you ever experienced when you were young? Was that because there's always because something slightly similar happened to me when I was. You just don't even think about death, do you? And then suddenly somebody you went to school with dies when you're in your early 20s, and you think, blimey, I didn't expect to see that or experience that so young.
Of course, but that's the nature of life, isn't it? Life's not fair, and there are no scales of justice, and awful shit happens. And in that instance, that's what happened. Yeah, it was awful. Yeah,
Yes, but
and
then
so no, it wasn't fair, but I think
yeah,
you learn that life isn't fair, and because life isn't fair, that's why you got to appreciate the good shit. And there
well,
is
quite.
some cosmic justice or something. Yeah.
Yes. So then, so
I don't
85,
have to talk about Wayne, like I've sort of, I wrote a book and it's sort of documentary about me as well. And they sort of both covered, I didn't want to talk about Wayne in the documentary and I talked about it in my book, but I kind of don't want to cheapen his memory by discussing too much about what happened to him. And
yes,
yeah, he was a great guy. He was only 21 when he died, and it sucks. It wasn't fair. And one thing I will say is that it's quite remarkable that that happened X number of years ago, decades ago. But I know within my community and amongst my friends, they still carry him, and it's really amazing and quite beautiful that so many people still have a kind of sense of closeness to him. He's really well regarded in our circle of friends. Yeah.
yes. Well, yes, it's always a very strange one. And then sort of by the mid 80s, obviously I put indie pop down between the years of 83 to 87. This is another sweeping statement. It was the years of the Smiths. They sort of appeared on our landscape or in our sort of airwaves. And they suddenly felt, the punk thing, post-punk, and then this next period just felt like, oh wow, this is different. And then you had all those bands like the June Brides and Mighty Lemon Drops, the Primitives, and then in Australia you had the obviously the Go Betweens and the Triffids, and then the Chills and bands like the Claim. Did you feel that there was a sort of a shift in the musical landscape at this stage?
Not really. I was sort of, well, for one thing, we didn't actually see any of those bands you mentioned, because we're in New Zealand. So our exposure to those bands was quite limited. But having said that, we knew what was going on because, you could buy records. In that period, what did I like? I like stuff like, I like the Gun Club. They're a great band. The Cramps. I love the Cramps. Who else did I like? I'd hear bands sort of drifting in that kind of sounded like they're doing stuff like from maybe it's a bit later, like Spaceman 3 and that kind of stuff, which was kind of like, there was bands back home who were Snapper, who was sort of like, Stereolab, all that kind of stuff. They were kind of
Yes.
that kind of minimalist kind of groove thing. But I think Snapper were possibly doing it before both those bands. But it's because there was this people of a similar age who were listening to the same kind of music, so they came out with that similar kind of thing. So that was always really nice when you arrived at landing points that someone on the other side of the world had landed on as well. And the beautiful thing about someone coming to the same musical conclusion, even though they're on virtually a different planet. But that happens all the time. One of my favourite, I love Thelonious Monk. If you listen to, and then in my classical journey, learning about classical music, Franz Liszt sounds like Thelonious Monk. And I think he plays all these blue off notes, and it's kind of like, oh wow! So this dude in Vienna arrived at these same musical conclusions as this guy in Harlem a century later. That's the great thing. It happens all the time.
Yes, my God. So your musical education in the 80s was expanding rapidly at this stage.
Yeah, well, that was the other thing too, is that I think one thing about well, the group that I grew up with, anyway, like everyone had really good record collections, and there's this sort of rallying point, a secondhand record store in Dunedin run by Roy Colbert, and Roy had an outstanding record collection, and he turned a lot of us kids on to, really good stuff. If you like this, you'll like this, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I really do think that with my peers anyway, a lot of them had an encyclopedic knowledge of rock music, maybe because there's nothing else to do in Dunedin. But yeah, once again, yeah, we were students of the game.
Yes. And did forming the Straitjacket Fits, was that quite an organic process? Was it quite fluid that you kind of came together for this kind of next chapter in your musical life?
Well, it was because John and I had been in the Double Happies, and after the death of Wayne, it took us a while to sort of get it together again. And but yeah, we knew that we wanted to keep playing music, partly in tribute to our friend, really, and also just sort of the truism from the lesson from something like that is that you got to rock when you're around to rock,
Yes.
and also do what you want while you're around to do stuff. So yeah, I think probably lit a fire under our ass actually, and so yeah, we wanted to play music, and so we ended up. The bass player David Wood came around to my flat one day and said, grumpily, "Oh, who are you looking for a bass player?" And so that's when David joined the band, and then yeah, Andrew Bruff climbed on board a few months later.
Did you feel like you were on a mission at this stage?
Yes, I don't know. Personally speaking, I've always had a fire under my ass with my music. I don't know whether it's to a point of feeling like I had a point to prove. I don't even know what the point is, and who I'm trying to. And I also don't know who I'm trying to prove it to. But look, I say get your gas where you can, and find your motivation from where you can, as long as it's a reasonably, not too unhealthy one. But yeah, we wanted to rock, and things were. That was the main thing. We just wanted to rock, and but also at that point too, I do know that things were really opening up for the Flying Nun bands overseas. So yeah, we wanted to go. We were sitting on the Dole in Dunedin. So yeah, the Chills and those bands, they're getting over and playing in Britain and the States. We thought, yeah, we want to do that too. So that
Yes.
was definitely, helped make the fire under our bottoms bigger.
Because quite a few of those bands, they all sort of came over to London mostly, didn't they, to go squatting, living here for quite a few years because they felt like they needed to be located here to somehow have their first part of the journey of going out of, say New Zealand or Australia and then sort of getting a bigger audience. So did you ever have that thought as well or conversation with the band about relocating to London to sort of, I don't know, have better access to the media or other musicians?
No, but that's true. The tyranny of distance they call it. Because the other thing too is that when you're not based in those places, you go there and you can play, which we did. We go play some amazing shows, but it takes you 2 or 3 years to get back there, and it's so expensive that people are forgotten by the next time you go back there. And so that did make it difficult. I don't know. We didn't really want to. Sort of at that point, like in Britain, for instance, the press was still making sheep jokes about us, and not realising that the joke was on them. And in America, they're probably more open. Like there wasn't that kind of patronising thing in America. I'd found that Americans were, well, they were then, where they're just kind of less judgmental, and they just sort of more accept you for what you do as opposed to where you come from. And yeah, so, but for instance, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why we didn't go base ourselves in those kind of places. Maybe we didn't feel the need to. The thing was, at that point too, A&R people from all over the world were coming out to New Zealand, so
Yes.
uh, trying to sign the band. So it's kind of like the world is coming to us to a certain way.
Because we were slightly fortunate in the sense we had three weekly music papers like the NME Sounds, Melody Maker, and then there's people like John Peel and then there was Janice Long and Kid Jensen, who all sort of helped promote, a lot of bands. And being an indie kid during that period, there's nothing more exciting than trying to find the most obscure band somewhere else out of the country to feel like you've just discovered something for yourself. So I think it's often was a benefit for a lot of bands that they knew that there would be some sort of pasty-faced kid sitting in their bedroom listening to the Peel show thinking, God, I'm going to get into that band because no one else will. So, and then you realise when you go to those gigs that 300 other people have also been buying that single as well. But it's, it was part of the identity part of the life at that point.
Sure. Plus, I think I'd be reluctant to describe New Zealand as a particularly exotic place, but when it's from far away, it kind of adds that. It's what I was saying about the romanticism and the mystery. It's got an element of mystery to it, and so it makes it enigmatic and therefore maybe intriguing as well. And yeah, so maybe there's that kind of stuff going on. But yeah, I know it as well. Like when you're a kid, you want to find the hippest thing as well. So yeah,
Yes.
maybe yeah, it was. It was just different. Like it was kind of the same, but it was different. There was a different edge to it.
So your first single, that was
Any
kind of
music, any music should reflect where it's from. In one way or another.
well, there was something kind of magical. I mean, it helped when you heard bands like the Chills coming out, and you thought, my God, that's just amazing. That's just some cosmic kind of sound. This is, and what else is going on in those kind of areas and regions of New Zealand, really? Because you know,
Yeah, well, Martin's songs that he wrote as he for me, I hate the whole, people they say it about everyone. People say it about me, your early stuff's your best stuff. But Martin, like those early classic chill songs like Pink Frost and Rolling Moon, he wrote those when he was 17, and this is an amazing, his songs that he wrote when he was 17 and 18 was just an amazing burst of songwriting, And so what you're saying about the qualities you heard in that music, that's how old he was when he was writing those songs, and he was really a precocious talent that way.
yes, magical. There you go. Your first single on Flying Nun, "Life in One Chord," did that come together relatively quickly? Did the songwriting sort of sort of with the band and yourself, did that all happen quite fast?
Yeah, we were on a tear there, the band had just come out and it was fresh and yeah, we'd sort of happened upon the sound, I guess the classic sort of description of that band is that I sort of bought, it was Lennon and McCartney. I was Lennon and Bruffy was McCartney, So he bought the poppy stuff, and I brought the more sort of jagged kind of stuff. But yeah, it was there's sort of an alchemy and chemistry to it that resulted in this sort of sound, and so yeah, that EP was a really strong opening statement. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. And then the album came out. At this stage, did you start sort of going abroad, playing live at this once you got the album out?
We did. We didn't like our album. We went in and recorded it too early, and we felt like we used our best songs on the EP actually. And it also wasn't a good time in the band. There's some personal problems going on, individually. So, but yeah, it still got released on Rough Trade, and yeah, that's when we started going overseas. We went to Australia. They really, really loved us in Australia because I think the Straitjackets were more rocky than a lot of the Flying Nun bands, which the Australians generally like, without being a generalisation or generalising about it. So yeah, that's when we started playing overseas. I think our first trip to England was Galaxy 500 were on Rough Trade, and so we ended up doing a European tour with them.
Oh, blimey. God. I remember seeing them about 89 at Norwich Arts Centre. So
Oh,
were you in Berlin then, the week the wall came down?
we were. It was amazing. Yeah, it was the first time I'd ever look. It was the first time I'd ever been to the Northern Hemisphere, and it was like this current events tour. First, we went to San Francisco the day after that huge earthquake they had there, which was in the late '89 or something, like
Yes.
where the freeway came down and all that kind of stuff. That was so weird, just being this loser from New Zealand wandering into this apocalyptic Northern Hemisphere scene. And then, yeah, we went to Germany, and that's the week that the wall came down. So we're seeing these families coming out of East Germany in their trabants and their grey palla and their overcoats and carrying bananas. and yeah, it was incredible.
Yes,
Like
you
we just
must.
sort of, like I say, we just sort of wandered through it, like, duh, where's the job?
Yes, just thinking,
Do
God,
they
this
sell
is
bananas?
that
Yeah,
was great timing, though. That's just
yeah,
amazing.
it was epic. Yeah.
Well, so it's also an interesting period because at that point in the late 80s, drugs started to change, and in this country, ecstasy started to become a thing, and that kind of changed the musical landscape in a way, and the sound started to change. People, the next generation of 16, 17-year-olds were coming along and were already wanting to hear their new sort of new bands at that point, and you had that sort of scene from Manchester, but you also had a sort of that Chicago house music. And then you had, people like the Pixies and Throwing Muses coming along and the sort of birth of grunge, I suppose. What was it like for you as an artist and a musician thinking, God, we've got our second album here and things have already changed quite a lot in a few years?
Well, I'd taken E for the first time before we did that album, the second album,
Right.
and for
So
me,
you were there.
yeah, well, I did, and it was this. I had a drinking problem, and I took E, and I stopped drinking for years, and it was this. It was this moment. It was never like that again. But the first time I took it was incredible. It actually changed my life, and it was this huge epiphany. And because I'd never actually felt like that before, I was like, oh, okay, people are okay, and yeah. So that was huge. So when we wrote the songs for Mount, I was completely sober, and yeah. I thought song, like none of the records the Straitjackets did are as good as the band we were live. The band were a great live band. We kind of struggled in the studio, but despite some of the 90s production touches, it's probably our strongest, most cohesive record.
Yes, God, that was good. Bad Note for a Heart was your opening track, actually. So again, did you all work sort of in as a band, or did you individually sort of put those songs together?
Well, there's two main songwriters. There was Andrew and myself, and I wrote the majority of. I think maybe on that album, Andrew had two or three songs or something, and but yeah, like we'd write this. We'd have the song, but we'd take it to the band and develop it with the band. Yeah, so yeah.
Yes, amazing. And were you still on Flying Nun at this stage?
Well, we'd started. That was eventually released by Arista, who are a major label in America, and also Mushroom Records, the Australian, quite big Australian label, had sort of climbed into bed with Flying Nun, and I don't know. I think that was the end of the romantic period of Flying Nun, anyway, because that's when record industry ninnies started getting involved, and the budgets got big, and we had a huge budget for Melt and all that kind of stuff. But that's when the record companies started, sticking their noses in. And like, for instance, Arista, they were just from another planet, and there were nice people in that building, but that was the era where the majors, they had a shitload of money to throw around at anybody. So and because they were making obscene amounts of money through the CD explosion and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But so they had lots of it. So they were looking at bands like REM and later Nirvana and thinking, oh, there's a gold mine here. So they started signing bands, alternative bands from all over the world, and we were one of them. But the mentality between where we come from and the people we're talking to in the New York offices of Arista, like I say, it was just different planets. Americans and American record industry people, why you won't do anything to be famous. And we're from New Zealand, man, and there's things we won't do to be famous. You know what I mean? And we're not pulling our pants down and say, or having a look, or even being that desperate about it, or prostituting yourself. And yeah, so our punk rock ideals really were rubbing up against a big brick wall in that particular scenario. But you live and learn. You live and learn,
Well,
and
it's all a good experience because most bands I've interviewed, they seem to from that period have a 5-year narrative, like a 12-month honeymoon period, you know, a single John Peel player, John Peel session, first album, transit van around the country, second album, you know, a bit bigger, you know, possibly a major label. The third album is often the kind of the end of the band, and you know, often if anybody tours America, that finished them off as well. But by then, the third album was when, you know, relationships weren't great, and there was also an incredible lack of money that people were still thinking, I've never worked so hard, and I'm still completely broke. So
We followed that classic curve, including the Peel session. So no, you've basically laid out our story. Yeah.
but then with Blow, your third album, did you go to America to record this? Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, we recorded in LA. An obscene amount of money was spent on it. That's that album. I know. I thought there were about four. I thought half of 4 or 5 songs in that record are actually really good tunes. The other half suck. And it was just it was just that classic thing. Also, when you're talking about the third label scenario, you got people on your ass the entire time going, "We need the new record. We need the new record." You know, and so we pushed into doing it before we were ready to do it. We needed another year to write songs. You know what I mean? And that happens so many times, and it's ridiculous because from a distance I can see it doesn't matter when you record. I produced a record for a person recently, and I said to her, oh, okay, so the album's going to come out, next year, not this year, but that's all right because you can spend time to get it exactly the way you want it, and in 10 years' time, it's not going to matter if it was released in 2024 or 2025.
Yes.
So the record is forever. So that happens as well. People just get, they get put into the meat grinder and they get pushed and sort of squeezed as much as they can out of it. And I say this without any bitterness or acrimony. It's just the way it is, and that's showbiz, man. And
Yes. With your, just going back, your John Peel session, did you record that at Maida Vale when you were on tour in the UK?
yeah, I can't remember where we recorded it, somewhere in London, but yeah, wherever they recorded the Peel sessions.
So this was in
Dale, like, was the engineer. He'd been in a quite famous band. I think.
Mott the Hoople.
Is that
Mott the,
Dale?
yeah, Dale Griffin was in the drummer with Mott the Hoople.
Oh, is he the guy who did the Peel sessions?
Yeah, so he was your producer.
He was the engineer. He was a nice guy. Yeah.
Yes, because a lot of people often said, God, he was grumpy. He hated us. But
Not us.
oh, that's good. I think in a way he probably had been in Mott the Hoople, had seen a lot of rock and roll throughout the 70s, and this was his paid job, and saw these young bands coming through and realised, God, they were probably shambling and a bit, all over the place. He was probably a bit frustrated and bitter, but there you go. You got on well with him, though.
From my memory, yeah. He was
Yes.
completely. We were very quick to take umbrage with anybody.
So you did. Were you pleased with because actually the John Peel sessions I found were often better than people's studio albums. It was kind of like the Smiths. I love that kind of compilation they put together that was recorded at the BBC, whereas their first album sounds really thin and awful.
That's right. I think it's also you're playing live, you know what I mean? And, it's that weirdness too, where you go into a studio, and I'm not saying studio creations can't be amazing, but you deconstruct it and construct it again. And whereas live, you're playing the song, and everyone's playing in a room. There's the energy to it. I can remember, when I was talking about the majors coming in and big budgets for the Flying Nomads. I can remember my friend from a band called Jean Paul Sartre Experience, and things got so ridiculous. He was a great drummer that when they went into their big studio with the big budget, the producer was making him record every part of his drum kit separately. So put down his ride cymbal, then put down his snare. It's just fucking ridiculous, man. And it wasn't a very good record. Well, it wasn't the best record, that's for sure. So yeah, when you're talking about the Peel thing, yeah, I think it's probably because bands were playing live. Yeah.
So when you went to do the third album, Andrew had left the band at that stage as well. So you were getting another guitarist in.
Yeah. Mark Peterson, he was a friend of the band's.
Did that feel like a big wrench in the band at that point?
What do you mean?
Well, having one of the members leave, the guitarist, who was also.
Oh, yeah, yeah. In retrospect, definitely, yeah. Andrew, who could be difficult, but he did really bring musically. Yeah, it was like I was saying before about the chemistry, the alchemy of the band. It was kind of like the pieces complemented each other. And when he left, sort of that sort of super melodic thing that he brought to it disappeared as well. And yeah, so I think the band actually became a plain a rock band at that point. And then we pushed into doing this album that we weren't ready to do. And so, yeah, to me, it didn't really work, and split up the band quite soon after that.
Did you then, because it was recorded between December and February 82 to 83, did you all relocate to LA and spend 3 months or 2 months in America writing and recording it?
Yeah, well, we're on Aristome, who spent a fortune on it. So, yeah, we stayed and cooped up in some motel in Sherman Oaks or something, yeah.
My God, that's fantastic! And you had Paul Fox produce it. Was he good with the band? Did he bring out the best in the sound?
Paul was a really nice guy. And I don't know, he kind of he smoked a lot of weed, as did Ed the engineer. I could probably say that from a distance. Well, I think Paul's passed away actually, but yeah, he was a good chap. But I don't know. He was also, Arista probably got him in because they thought that he would. I felt like that record, it was kind of caught between two worlds. It wasn't alternative enough for and I think it's probably a common story. It wasn't weird enough and it wasn't commercial enough. So it sort of straddled this nowhere kind of land. And one thing I can remember with Paul, we were sitting around in this haze of marijuana smoke, discussing music, and he started talking about an Eric Clapton song. We hated Eric Clapton, and
Yes, well,
he
quite.
said, he said, "That's such a beautiful song," and we were like, "Oh my god!"
Oh dear.
Yeah, so there was a yeah, but like I say, no, like I said, I'm not rubbishing Paul. He was a good dude.
Yes, well, no, absolutely. But yeah, sometimes you think, oh, even if you like, Eric Clapton and It's Wonderful Tonight or whatever the song is, you wouldn't admit it in public, would you? Really? That's a guilty pleasure,
Wonderful Night is particularly offensive, yeah, but that wasn't the one. It was another one that was also kind of offensive too. But yeah, Wonderful
Yes.
Tonight. Hold it. No, I'm still not down with that one. Sorry, Eric. Yeah.
No, yeah, that was terrible. And then, so did you come together to end the band, or how does a band finish? Is in your case, did you all when you were recording that album, did you all know it was going to be over for the band?
No, no, I'd kind of had an inkling before then. I just wanted to try something different at that point, and I kind of felt like the band magic had gone from that band. And like say there are some good songs on that last record, which I think still sound good. But yeah, I thought, okay, I'll give this a crack and see what happens, because by that point I was kind of the songwriter and all that kind of thing. But I was also ready for a change, and yeah, so I kind of had an inkling of that. Then after that, we did this really desultory European tour with the Bats and the JPS. And at that point, grunge was taking off, and so our scene was sort of, a bit passe, I think. And
Yes.
yeah, I can remember the record company made us go through Europe twice in a bus, and I can remember the second time, everyone got sick, and yeah, it was miserable actually. And then we came back, and everyone split up. So yeah.
Yes, I think touring is quite hard. And then, is this when you formed Dimmer?
So I felt quite kind of burnt by the whole experience. So I went back to Dunedin, my hometown, and I basically dropped out for a couple of years here. So it was probably longer than that. I made a couple of records, including the first couple of Dimmer singles. But yeah, I wanted to do something different, and I was over rock music at that point because it just seemed kind of reactionary and it had no surprises to it. And for me, the music that I thought was really interesting and innovative and exploratory was the electronic stuff. That's where people were really trying shit that I hadn't heard before. And I sort of became interested in applying that to. I was a guitar player, but trying to apply that kind of ethos to guitar music. So yeah, that took me a long time to get together, but I eventually put out the first Dimmer album in 2001 or something. and I still really rate that record. It's probably still my favourite record I've made.
Yes. So that first one you did, I believe You're a Star, that was on Columbia Records.
Yeah, so I split up with Flying Nun, and then yeah, I did a record with Sony, yeah, or Columbia.
Yes, you did quite a few singles though. There was a sort of scattering, wasn't there, of singles coming out with Dimmer at that stage in the late
Yeah.
90s.
Well, the first thing we did actually came out as a sub pop single. It was called Crystallator, which is an instrumental, and yeah, well, and still cooks, and yeah. So that was the first Dimmer thing, and then I did another single for Flying Nun called "Don't Make Me Buy Out Your Silence." And they both came out in the sort of mid to late 90s. And then, yeah, I sort of, I don't know, I sort of had to, I had to go away and fall in love with music again. There was my actual, it was kind of like a recovery period where I felt really sullied by my whole experience of going to the epicenter of the music industry. I thought, okay,
Right.
this has got nothing to do with what made me want to play music, you know. And so I had to, you know, I had to get to the point where when I thought of music, I wasn't thinking of the guy in the publishing office, you know, that I was thinking about music I loved. And so for those 2 or 3 years when I completely dropped out, and I did a lot of jamming, just a lot of improv with friends, and just being in the moment, playing music. And I just listened to a lot of music, and I fell in love with music again. You know, I reconnected with the source, and that's why ever since then, that's why I've continued making music, because I found my way back to the source, and I still find ways to do that. You know, and if anything, as I get older, you know. Um, I recognise the value of music, you know, both for me and just for people as a communal experience. You know, it's a beautiful thing to offer the world, man. And it's also this incredibly mystical and transcendent force. And so when I'm talking about going back to the source, that's what you need to connect with as a musician. And that's what to me is important. And I don't really care if I'm playing in a fucking stadium or if I'm jamming with some friends in a vasectomy clinic, which I'm currently doing because one of my friends is a doctor. And good ambience. And it doesn't matter, you know, when that thing appears in the room, that magnetic force, you know, it's like there it is. And it can be great if you do it in front of an audience, but if you don't do it in front of an audience, it doesn't matter, you know. It's just, yeah, like I say, it's reconnecting with the force. It's this amazing
Yeah.
thing. As a musician, I feel really, it's so good that I have the ability to be able, and the tools to be able to get to that thing.
Yes. So when we turned that millennium and then, we went into 2000s, that's when did you sign for Columbia to bring out, I believe You're a Star? Was this the kind of the first kind of major project that you had as Dimmer?
Yeah, well, once again, I spent years working on that record in a porticon building that we airlifted because of their budget, this aluminium porticon into the back into my backyard. And they set me up with Pro Tools, and I knew nothing about that, and except how to press record and how to delete, and it's pretty much still my engineering skills to this day. And yeah, but it took me forever, and but it's a real good record. So there we go.
Yes. But did that mean that you sort of had the spirit was back and you felt really good about what you were doing?
I knew it was a good record, yeah. But the thing was, is that Columbia didn't actually release it outside of New Zealand, and yeah, which was quite painful because I knew it was as good as anything else out there.
Yes, that must have been horrendous. But then you've got to hear the music quite quickly after that. So was this kind of material that you'd already had, or was this material that you wrote after that first album with Dimmer?
No, there were three more Dimmer albums after that. No, I just basically went into this sort of thing where I just went from album to album and just kept writing. Yeah, but I still think the first Dimmer album was real good. All the other ones, they're all the same story as well. And that, you know, I think there's some good bits on all of them. I'm incredibly highly critical of my stuff, you know, and yeah, I think there's good stuff and there's okay stuff on all of those records. Yeah.
And then you also do sort of solo projects as well as yourself. So is this another part of your musical landscape?
Yeah, look, man, I think I've only done 2 albums maybe since, let's see, I did one in 2010, Degrees of Existence, the Dimmer record, and then I put out an album where I just played piano, and when I couldn't play piano, that's 2016.
This is
But yeah,
Offsider.
I haven't done any albums apart from that. But I've actually just since then I've just done quite a lot of different stuff. I've done soundtrack work. I've worked with dance. I just did a ballet school for the Royal New Zealand Ballet. I just recorded an album of my tunes with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, Ooh La La La. I did there's a couple of theatre shows where I was being, I wrote a book. I was just to keep my creative spirit alive. I just want to try different things, and I want to work with
Yes.
different. It's interesting, and also pulls out different parts of your own creative personality as well. And the last thing I want to be is the dude who's living, whose currency is songs that he wrote when he was 20, And I want to keep developing as an artist and keep trying shit, and I am, so that's good.
That is
And
very
yeah,
good.
but the solo shows, yeah, I've just done a bunch of them actually. They just put out a documentary film about me last year, and I did a whole bunch of solo shows in support of that, where I did play songs from my back catalogue, because for a long time I didn't. I kind of avoided doing that. I thought it was too retrogressive. But yeah, it was awesome revisiting some of those tunes and having just worked with symphony orchestras and all that kind of stuff to take it back to a dude playing still quite rocking solo guitar has been really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of
So
picture myself as I kind of, even though I sound nothing like it, it's kind of the solo stuff. I kind of envisage the spirit, of those late 40s, 50s John Lee Hooker records have got that voodoo all over them, and it's just a dude playing a vaguely out of tune guitar and stomping his foot and, and killing it.
yes, well, absolutely. So when did you write your book? When did that come out?
It came out in 2020, yes.
Was
It
that a
won, it won the National Book Award, don't you know?
No, I don't. God, that is so embarrassing, isn't it? I've
I
omitted
was
it
very
now.
proud of that. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I won music awards and stuff, but I loved winning the one for my book, man. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
And is it available from all good bookshops and also online?
It's available online. Yeah, it's called Dead People I Have Known. Yeah.
Blimey, when did you start writing it?
Um, I started writing that probably about 2017 or something.
What was the,
Yeah.
did you, I was going to say, when did you do, wait, what was the reason for what was the catalyst?
Well, I always thought I'd write something, and then my mother passed away actually, and my father had already died, and and I went back to my hometown after my mum died, and I thought then I could actually tell my story and like write about my family without throwing them under the bus, but still be open about my life.
Yes.
And yeah, so that was the catalyst. And then I found this crib or this batch right at the head of the Otago Harbour with this amazing place called Aramoana, which is 10 kilometres from the closest shop. It's me, you, the seals, and the penguins, and this incredible topography of the peninsula. Um, and the person who owned the batch rented it out to me for $100 a month. So that's how I got my book financed to write it. And I didn't approach any publishers. I didn't go for any grants. I just sat there and wrote it. And yeah, and because I thought, I've always been a writer, and I thought I've got a story to tell. And also, it's that thing, you can have the most amazing stories, but if like for instance, incredible historical events, but they're written in such a dry academic way, it's like wading through quicksand.
Yes.
Pretty tiny stories can be completely compelling if they're told in a good way. Do you know what I mean? So I think of this Japanese documentary. What was it called? I Dream of Jiro or something like that. And it was about master sushi makers. And it was just such a quiet and little movie, but it was utterly compelling. It was like, yeah, chop that fish, man. And yeah, it's just a great piece of storytelling. So anyway, yeah. So
Fantastic.
like that, yeah,
That's,
yeah.
I was going to just say the book is available as a Kindle. edition, which I've not got. Is it going to be available as a paperback? Will it be available to sort of buy elsewhere via
I
any of
don't know
the?
if they released it overseas because it was such kind of a New Zealand centric kind of story, but it's not. It's kind of like it's, I don't know if I'm famous enough, basically to get it released overseas. But yes, you can get it on Kindle. You can order it through the publisher. Yeah, my thing with that book too was that New Zealanders can be very reticent and very retiring and very self-effacing, and I think we've all got that to a certain extent. But it's kind of almost like this faux humility, and that people can be quite staunch and and quite critical here. So there was I didn't want to have any faux humility in it, and I also didn't want to have the self-aggrandizing, self-justifying tone. Oh, once again I was right, and all that kind of stuff. Because life's not like that, And so yeah, I was brutally honest, and I love that. It's kind of punk rock. It's just putting it in people's
Yes.
face. I don't have to construct some social fucking media image. Who cares? And the other thing, when you get older too, you worry less and less about the outside noise. You care about your people. And your love for your people and their love for you, and that's all that matters. So I don't give a shit about the outside noise, and there was quite a bit of noise. I think I stepped on quite a few toes, but it wasn't a vindictive or mean-spirited book. But yeah, I didn't hold my punches. That's for sure.
Yes. And did you, with your sort of music interest, did you sort of find that during that sort of 90s and the O years, you started to sort of listen to a lot more music once you sort of discovered, electronic music and dance music? Was that where you started to appreciate classical or jazz? Did you start sort of also becoming more kind of curious about the outside world?
I kind of knew about jazz and yeah, but classical music, no, that had been this huge foreboding mountain. I'd never really found it in. I never had any formal music education, so as I wasn't playing Chopin as an 11-year-old or something. But yeah, I knew that it was this mountain, and when you come from a rock background, it can be hard to make sense of head and tail of it. And I just listened until could make it. I just listened, And it's like I was saying right at the start when we were talking earlier about you just got to spend time with stuff, and if it's good, it'll eventually reveal itself.
Yes, absolutely. And did you say there was also a film about you as well?
Yeah, so there's a documentary released last year called Life in One Chord. Yeah, I'll send you a link to it if you want.
God, I'd love to sort of see it actually.
Yeah,
I'd seen the one on the chills, which was quite sort of amazing. And I remember, yes, I think it was Martin said he found it was quite strange hearing what people thought of him in the film. And yes, it was quite, I
yeah. Well,
suppose
me
it's
and Martin compared notes on the whole experience of that year before he passed away. Yeah, I think we're both kind of weirded out by it, and yeah, yeah. So um, yeah, like I say, when they were doing this documentary, it was filmed over 7 years, and but I agreed to do it before my book came out. And when I put my book out, I thought, okay, I've revealed a lot about myself, and I'm actually completely over about making myself available in a public sense like that. So I was kind of reticent through the whole film experience. But the director, Margaret's cool, and I knew her motivations were good, and that she. So even though I was completely over myself and a reluctant passenger quite often,
yes.
um, yeah, I thought Margaret. Yeah, oh no, she treated me well without being a sycophant, you know what I mean? And yeah, and people seem to really like the film, so that's good.
Right. And did you sort of manage to sort of process it and enjoy it yourself?
No, I couldn't actually handle going. Come on, man, would you? I said, like my friend said, are you going to the premiere? They had the premiere in Dunedin, and they had in a theatre to 1,200 people. Like that's like a nightmare, right? Like so it's about you. Like imagine if you walked in, you might as well sort of have your pants around your ankles and go, "Oh, hi everybody, yeah, yeah, let's talk afterwards." And so I thought, no, I can't actually handle the psychic heat of going to something like that, so I didn't go to it. So, and I couldn't actually. I eventually sneaked a peek at it. Margaret sent me an online version, and it was like I say, I thought she did a really good job, and I felt good about it. But it was so full on seeing your life flash before your eyes in an hour and a half like that, and also to see a lot of friends who are no longer here. You know, it was actually quite heavy, and yeah, but then so I didn't go see it in any theatres, but then I just did a solo tour and I played some smaller towns and in a place called Hokitika. I played in a theatre that also doubled as a movie theatre. So the people there set me up the day after my gig and played it really fucking loud in the theatre just to me and my partner. So that was a great way to see it, and fed us whitebait fritters at the same time. So, and there was no
Right.
one else in the theatre, so that was a good way to see it. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. Well, yes, I would love to. Yes, if that's possible. I mean, sometimes, I mean, doing sort of these things, people, do you have a PDF of your book? Because it is incredibly hard to find, isn't it, online? It's really, it's yes, it's very expensive if one was to try and buy a hard copy.
Is it not available on Kindle?
Oh, Kindle. I haven't. Does Kindle work on computers? I've never used Kindle.
Oh, I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question. Yeah.
I will have to ask a computer person who knows about the wonderful.
I don't know if I've got a PDF of it, but yeah, no, it's a good read. Yes, I've got some scurrilous tales to tell, that's for
Well,
sure.
I know I'd be very curious. Actually, it's always fascinating the life of a musician. So, yeah. Well, look,
Yeah,
this is
before I started writing it, I'd sort of read quite a few New Zealand autobiographies and memoirs just to see what other people had made of living in this place. One of my favourites was Janet Frame, who was from the same area that I was from. She's a beautiful writer. One rock memoir that I did read and I really enjoyed was the Luke Haynes one. What was that one?
oh God, yes, I've got it here.
That was
Okay.
hugely entertaining.
Is this
And
where
I love the fact that he is quite. I don't really know his music, but
was that Bad Vibes?
he was. It's the one where he just talks. He didn't get on with the bass player, and he doesn't name the bass player for the entire book, and just refers to him as the bass player.
I know. Well, I got absolutely drawn into that because it was so funny. He just hates all his band, doesn't he? Basically.
It was an excellent, entertaining read. So when I read that just before I was writing my book, and even though I don't feel like I ripped him off or anything, I really liked the spirit. I liked how irreverent it was. Come on, rock and roll. And irreverent and unafraid. So if anything I took from that book to put it on my own book, yeah, I definitely wanted to write quite a cheeky book as well.
Yes, I think because it was so over the top, people realized he was also playing a part. So he could probably get away with more stuff than being very serious. And then, I don't know, he just kind of immediately sort of said how he felt, but probably exaggerated it. And the way he talked about the record company, Fire Records, was also quite funny. So, yeah,
It's just yeah, no, it's good. It's highly entertaining. Yeah,
it was
good
a
one.
classic. Yes. Oh, yes. I will have to dip into that again, actually. But look, thank you ever so much for your time. This has been amazing. And
Nice one, man.
yes, I'm pleased it all sort of lined up so easily in the end. So,
Yeah, good
yes.
one. Yeah,
But look,
cool. Hey,
thank
well, look, if I find that PDF, I'll send it to you, and yeah, I'll send you a link to that film as well.
God,
Yeah.
that would be amazing. Do you put most of your stuff on is Facebook your go-to kind of notice board of what's
I'm
happening?
on Instagram, Shayne P. Carter. All my new ventures are on Shayne P. Carter on Bandcamp. My new sort of records I've done recently. Instagram, Shayne P. Carter. Same with Facebook as well, actually. Although Facebook may be under dimmer band. But yeah, so yeah, I'm around on those things, yeah.
Right, okay then. I have never come across that first one you mentioned.
What's that? The
Shapey car?
Instagram one?
No, no,
Shayne P.
no. Yes. What is that?
Well, that's my name. Doesn't ring a
Oh,
bell.
right. God, I thought it was some new social media platform site. I thought, what the hell
Oh,
is
no, that's my next move, man. Me and the tech bros. Yeah.
your trillion bond?
I've
Yes,
got a great
no.
idea. JP Carter. Yeah.
Yes, right. I was thinking, oh, okay. And I was trying to look casual and go, oh, yes, of course. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, I know that platform. I'm on that one too. Yeah. Hey, good on you, David.
Yes, thank you. I'll let you get on.
Nice
But
talking to you, man.
Thanks for your time. And yes, take care.
Take it easy, brother.
Bye-bye. I'll say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And that is the end of the interview. That was me in conversation with Shayne Carter talking about his life in music. If you want to know any more information, he has a Bandcamp page, which is in the links below. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. Also, all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Have a great week. Stay safe.